Welcome to Press TV's Spotlight. UK's ruling Conservatives have lost the seat of North Shropshire, a seat they held for nearly 200 years, to the Liberal Democrats in a by-election blow to Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The embattled Premier says that he takes personal responsibility for his party's very disappointing by-election results, and he totally understands why people in the district are frustrated. The seat became vacant after a Conservative ally of Johnson stepped down over breaking lobbying rules. The Prime Minister has been hit by several setbacks and scandals in recent weeks, including a surging Omicron variant and tanking approval ratings. He's also particularly plagued by recent allegations about his government staff attending Christmas parties last year in violation of COVID restrictions. Johnson has denied that any rules were broken and has ordered an inquiry. Joining us now from London is Press TV's very own Said Puroza with more details on this, in what by many cases devastating loss for the Conservatives. Said?
It definitely is, Barry, a devastating loss for the Conservatives, and it has come as a shock to members of the Conservative Party, particularly because it's happened at the very heart of Conservative territory. As you said earlier, these are areas where the Conservatives have had enormous majorities for decades and decades, and for that to happen, for such a massive electoral swing to happen to the Liberal Democrats is a shocker. And some are saying this was not necessarily a vote for the Lib Dems, rather a vote against the Conservatives, a warning shot to them to get their act together, for this government to get its act together. And what is really very, very important is the scale of this change that has taken place. They had more than 23,000 lead, and now the Lib Dems have managed to turn that around. So the scale of it is very important. Partly it's got to do with what's been happening over the past few weeks. For example, the stories of the parties that took place last year, this time, that we continue to endlessly hear about, the fact that there were images of the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson's own advisors, laughing at the public, making a mockery of the guidelines that they themselves set, and the public went to such great lengths to adhere to. And also stories of how the Prime Minister couldn't afford refurbishing his own residence at number 10 Downing Street, and had to ask a Conservative Party donor to fork over £100,000 to fit that bill for him. And aside from all of that, Bardia, we're in the middle of a public health emergency, and some of the messaging coming out of Downing Street has really been confusing. We have seen, for example, some of that reflect in members of the government contradicting the country's chief medical officer in the past few days. And so what is happening right now is members of the Conservative Party are asking the question about this Prime Minister, whether or not he is fit to stay in power. Can he lead them through the next election to victory? And of course, there is no settled view on that. The vote seems to be split. Some of the MPs saying that he is still a winner, that he can deliver if given the time. But there are others who are saying, in their words, that lepers cannot change their spots, that perhaps it is time to look for an alternative to Boris Johnson. And you see, the bucket of bad news pouring over Boris Johnson does not stop there. There are two investigations that are ongoing as we speak. One into his apartment refurbishing, and also allegations of parties, or into Christmas Gate, parties that allegedly took place last year. The outcome of those inquiries out soon, and in the words of some analysts and members of the Conservative Party as well, he has received two big blows of late. One, the rebellion by members of his own party on the question of whether or not to introduce more strict restrictions in light of the Omicron variant ripping through the population, more infections being announced every day so far, and with things even getting worse and breaking more records, according to the chief medical officer, in the coming weeks and months, and also this election defeat. And it seems that if this prime minister and his government receive another blow as potent as these two, he's going to be out, Bardia.
All right, thanks a lot, Saeed. Press TV Saeed Puttaza joining us from the British capital, London. But however, joining us on tonight's Spotlight, we have journalist and political analyst Fra Hughes joining us from Belfast, and also senior analyst at Foreign Policy and Focus, Ian Williams, is joining us from New York. Let's start off with Mr. Williams in New York. Sir, how did the Conservatives lose one of their safest seats to the Lib Dems?
Complete incompetence, the visible signs of lying and dissimulation, the abuse of privilege, attempts to lie to the public. It's quite a big rap. The amazing thing is it's taken this long to turn out. But you have to put it in the context that this time last year, people in Britain were not going to hospitals to bid farewell to their family when they were dying. They weren't going to hospitals when mothers were having children. Families were not able to see each other during the holiday season because they were obeying the laws that the regulations laid down by the government, whose members were carousing and cavorting in number 10 Downing Street. So this is really sort of playing the fiddle while Rome burns. It's got an extra resonance. And of course, it's on top of increasing visible and irrefutable signs of incompetence on the part of Boris Johnson. He has an assembly of charlatans and money makers, confidence tricksters, people who lie regularly, people who are looting the public purse for contracts, continual reservations and revelations about his ministers making money on COVID contracts to produce useless cures, useless equipment. It really is amazing that he's lasted this long. And part of the reason for that, which is revealed here, is the complete incompetence of the opposition. I mean, Keir Starmer has all the charisma of a cold rice pudding, and it shows that it's one of the reasons why Labour was trashed. But no one's voting for the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats have, for many years now, been a party where you say none of the above by ticking next to them. On the few occasions they've had any responsibility was in the coalition with the Conservatives, where they're every bit as big. It was a Liberal minister who privatised the Royal Mail, for example, the post office, when he was in the coalition. So they've got much to answer for, but they managed to evade responsibility because it was the coalition, and people are forgetting that. They're coming back to it. They are now the none of the above column. But
sure.
It really is difficult to work out where things will go. One of the signs that some commentators have assumed is this may mean that the Brexit coalition that brought Boris Johnson in there might be losing its steam, that people might realise that there's more to life than Union Jacks and square sausages and any of the other trivia that he played such a part in promulgating during the Brexit campaign.
Mr. Hughes in Belfast, how big of a setback is this for Boris Johnson and his Tories in the views of many? The event in North Shropshire could be the beginning of the end for the Tory rule. What do you think?
I think it's very easy to jump on the bandwagon that says having lost a safe Conservative seat that they've held for over 200 years, it's a damning indictment of the government. It's a damning indictment of Boris Johnson's leadership. But I think we should also bear in mind that it's only 2 years ago that Boris Johnson won a landslide victory on behalf of the Conservative Party. They gained a net gain of 48 seats, and they had 43.6% of the popular vote. So we're in halfway through the parliamentary 5-year cycle. We are in the middle of a pandemic. It's been handled appallingly by Boris Johnson and his government. I think a lot of the backlash that we've seen in North Shropshire is actually coming from the fact that the incumbent MP had to resign because of his lobbying tactics. So he was seen as an untrustworthy person within the Conservative Party, holding that particular seat on behalf of the Conservative Party. And it is a reflection of the Conservative government and the corruption that seems to have embedded itself so deeply in the heart of the government. But considering that Boris Johnson turned a red wall into a blue wall in the north of England, I think a lot of the people that have been elected with Boris Johnson in 2019 should show him some loyalty going forward. There's no election until 2024. We've seen peerages for to be bought. We have seen cash for questions. We have seen passports for sale. There's always been corruption in government. There's always been a backlash during the governmental cycle. And I think Boris Johnson could ride this out unless there is a leadership battle, which is more to do with the internal machinations of the Conservative Party than it is anything to do with this latest electoral defeat or where he stands in the polls of public opinion.
Ian Williams, Conservative Party Chairman Oliver Dowden said, "I know that the voters of North Shropshire are fed up and they wanted to give us a kicking. We've heard that message loud and clear." What message was that exactly, and what are the Conservatives going to do about it?
Well, I think from the point of view of the Conservative chairman and the others, the big problem was Boris Johnson and his colleagues got caught. Not that they did it, they got caught. This government and this generation of politicians have few, if any, ethical scruples whatsoever about doing what they do. It's getting caught in public. And they haven't got caught as often because they have had to deal with, they haven't had to deal, in fact, with any type of vigorous press. What they've had to deal with was a press that is overwhelmingly an amen corner and has supported them through thick and thin and made apologies for them. I gathered the Sun's website this morning, the Murdoch press, didn't even mention the by-election loss. It led off on far more other important things. So it's typical of the misleading from the media. But Conservative Party leadership isn't designated by the public, isn't designated even by the mass of Conservative members. We're quite right. It's the people who were just elected on his coattails. When they think that Boris Johnson is going to lose them their safe seats and their sinecures and their access to power and their ability to dip the public purse, that's when there'll be a country house conclave somewhere. All of his old mates from the public schools in Oxbridge will get together for a gathering one weekend, and Boris will be carried out on a stretcher with a knife in his back. It's what happened to Margaret Thatcher. It's what happened to all his previous incumbents who passed their vote by date in the Conservative Party. They don't do it on popular revolts. It's done behind back doors. You know, the butler never did it, but someone in the Conservative Party will have done it, and he will be forced to resign. Whether he goes to the next election or not, if he does, it will be fatally flawed. But he's saved by one redeeming feature, is that who else is there? There aren't any serious contenders in the Conservative Party because they're all every bit as corrupt and ineffectual as he is. There's in the Labour Party, I mean, I've never seen such an appallingly mediocre lineup. Regardless of what their plain politics are, and most of them evade the politics completely, they are complete mediocrities. I wouldn't elect them to a parish council. And the Liberal Democrats, their only benefit, as I said, is they're the box that you say, I don't like any of them. So it doesn't matter who they put up, but people will vote for them rather than vote for Keir Starmer or Boris Johnson.
Mr. Hughes.
So it really is an abysmal state of British politics. Without vision, the politicians may as well perish.
We'll get back to you in a minute, Ian Williams. Mr. Hughes, Boris Johnson says that he takes responsibility, personal responsibility for his party's disappointing results in North Shropshire. He said he totally understands why people are frustrated in the district. talking about the effect of that, will we see a new and refined Boris Johnson after this, or will it be the same plethora of mistakes?
I think Boris has been defined by his failures in politics as much as his successes. He's been forced to resign from different positions within the party in the past. I think the way forward for Boris, he's a bungling idiot who bumbled his way to the top of the tree of the British political elite within the Conservative Party. He's like a Pooh Bear character who seems to stagger from one kind of crisis to another. I think really what you'll see from Boris going forward is he'll have to try and rein in some of the people that are leading him into these debacles. I mean, they're claiming that a lot of the flack he gets is about the Christmas party that apparently he didn't attend. And then again, there is this corruption that's seen within the party that I'm not saying he's not associated with, but there's been no public outcry about him personally being involved in this. So I think what he needs to do is rally the troops. He'll have to take like a head count of who supports him, who's maybe out to get him in a kind of parliamentary political coup, try and rally the wagons, and maybe do a cabinet reshuffle. Isn't that what you do when you're in trouble as a Prime Minister? You decide who's got your back and you put them in positions of power in order to protect your own inner sanctum within Parliament. So that's what I would see. Maybe a reshuffle, maybe throwing, maybe trying to throw more money at the NHS in order to buy more votes and buy more popularity going forward. But I don't think it matters on one level actually who's in charge. If Boris Johnson went tomorrow, the Conservative Party domestic and foreign policy wouldn't change. And for a working class person who's on minimum wage, for a refugee seeking asylum, and for someone who's on an NHS waiting list, whoever runs the Conservative Party will make no material difference to their lives.
Ian Williams, we can't talk about Boris Johnson's government and the Conservatives without mentioning Brexit. Now, I was listening to some interviews earlier prepping up for the show, and the Tories, they feel that they've delivered on the bigger issues, for example, getting Brexit done. But Brexit is still a spider web of ambiguities, disagreements, economic setbacks. How did they deliver on Brexit when the deal itself has turned into a reason of dissatisfaction among the British public?
Oh, Brexit was a mixed thing. It meant different things to different people. There's a genuine working class patriotism in Britain that had been fermented to regard everything as European interference. And many of the things, Europe was actually protecting many working class people, like the unions and other forms of democracy, against the locals, the local rapacious conservatives. So it's very mixed, but the message coming across was it was patriotic. Now, what's patriotic about having a bumbling idiot of an Etonian who is on the verge of pushing Northern Ireland out, as you would appreciate from there, out of the Union, and consequently bringing possibly Scotland and Wales out as well? There's nothing patriotic about this at all. And of course, he's completely silent on the issue of Wales, Scotland, and in fact, the north of England. I mean, his is a home county government. It's a regional government, even with the famous Red Wall going. So Brexit isn't enough.
Let's bring that same question over to you, Mr. Hughes. When we're talking about Brexit, the Conservatives feel they've delivered, but looking at the outcome of it, maybe it's the opposite.
Well, they have delivered in that they have technically taken the United Kingdom, or England, Scotland and Wales, out of the European Union. Now, the fact that the Northern Ireland remains part of the single market for the economy and for exports and stuff because of the Good Friday Agreement, and I'm not wanting to have a hard border on the island of Ireland, so the border is in the British Channel. I think people voted to leave the European Union on many different levels. It was sold as many different things as our friend has said to many different people. It has failed in some respects because the British economy is faltering. With the pandemic, you see, there's been a convergence of different things that have happened. Britain leaving the EU alongside the pandemic. With the pandemic, we had tens of thousands of people, taxi drivers, lorry drivers, people involved in the hospitality industry, all kind of laid off, all found different jobs. So there is an issue with bringing goods into Britain outside of the border control issue because there's a shortage of drivers, because people left that particular employment because of COVID and because the jobs just didn't exist. So Britain's suffering from a lack of imports. There have been queries around foodstuffs on the shelves in and on the British supermarkets. But we can see that as inflation picks up and the interest rates begin to bite and people's incomes begin to falter, I think on an economic level going forward, Britain is definitely going to struggle in the next couple of years. And I think that could have a profound effect on the government itself going forward.
Sure. Mr. Williams is back with us for one last question. Ian, I know you addressed this a little earlier before, but I want you to look into your crystal ball and give us a prediction. Do you think that Boris Johnson will be Prime Minister and leader of the party as Britain comes to the next general election? Very briefly, if you may, because we're running out of time.
Well, no. He can reshuffle his cabinet, but, I mean, how can you reshuffle something when every card in the pack is a joker? He really has he's driven out all the substantial people, or they've walked out holding their noses in disgust at his behaviour. All of the, the Tories of principle and ethics. I often find that difficult to say, but there are people, and he's driven them all out. What he's surrounded himself is what in British parlance we call flyboys and conmen and women, who are, visibly disdainful of the common people around them. They are not populists. Brexit was a populist cause, but these people aren't populists. They have profound disdain for the voters, and it showed with every pronouncement. So, I think he's going to be hard put. The Tory party is going to be hard put to find a credible alternative, but they will still try to get rid of him because he's got too much radiation attached to him.
All right. Thanks a lot, gentlemen. Journalist and political analyst Frau Hughes joining us from Belfast. And thanks to senior analyst at Foreign Policy and Focus, Ian Williams, joining us from New York. Also, special thanks to our viewers for staying with us on tonight's Spotlight. It's good night for now, and see you next time.